Welcome to the Becoming You show, where limits get torched and possibility takes the mic. I'm Leah Rowling, human in permanent beta, neurostrategist, mom to 3 amazing humans, married to 1 legendary soul, and your no fluff permission slip to stop waiting. Every week, we rewire brain patterns, smash hand-me-down mindsets, and dive into the daring, identity-shifting conversations most people dodge. Ready to turn potential into proof? Grab your pen. Your next chapter starts now. Hello, my beautiful friend. Welcome to the Becoming You show. I am your host, Leah Rowling, and I'm so grateful that you're here. We're just going to dive into it today because this conversation is going to be an interesting one. And like a lot of them, most of these conversations, I really think about them. I'm very deliberate around what I want to bring forward, and sometimes I come into them with great confidence, knowing, yeah, this is going to land. Like this is the message, and today's message, I'm not bringing in with so much confidence, right? So I hope the conversation goes the way that I have in my mind, but we'll just kind of see. This month is on courage, right? We're in a series on courage, but not courage in a way that the world usually talks about, not motivational poster courage, not just believe in yourself courage, not the kind of courage that sounds good, like on social media and disappears on Tuesday afternoon. We're talking about the real kind, right? The kind that asks you to stop performing your life, to stop doing the very thing that you did yesterday, that gave your life certainty, right? Meaning that you're going to live today knowing that you just did what you did yesterday and survived it, okay? In episode 1, we talked about worth, right? About the payoff to staying unworthy, about the exhausting ways that we spend our lives trying to acquire proof, right? Proof of worth for something that was never actually missing in the first place. And I think the invitation was the work isn't to practice and become worthy. The work was to stop practicing unworthiness. So that was the invitation there. In episode 2, we moved into the tell, right? The 3 experiences that we navigate our life in, and the quiet signal that our body sends, right? When the truth is trying to speak through you. We talked about the fact that your body often knows long before your mind catches up, that somewhere beneath all the pleasing and the performing and the overthinking and the over rehearsing and the over ruminating and the over worrying and the over management, right? There is a wiser voice trying to guide you back to yourself. And I kind of gave you a strategy to access it. And today we're going to go quieter. Okay. I want to talk about something that I think many of us are experiencing, but very few of us are actually naming, which is why the conversation, it's why I don't have a lot of like certainty around it. Maybe that's a good thing, okay? Because I think a lot of us have become the audience, right? Stay with me, the audience of our own lives. I think we have become so self-monitoring, so self-evaluating, so self-aware, right? To the other extreme. Like decades ago, in the mindfulness movement, the invitation was to become self-aware, like to know yourself, right? To watch yourself, to be the observer of yourself. And I think we maybe have taken that to the other extreme, okay? So much so that we struggle, maybe, no longer fully know what it feels like to simply just relax into our own experience, right? To laugh kind of without watching ourselves laugh. You follow? To cry without analyzing ourselves crying. To have a moment without immediately turning it into meaning or a content or an insight or a growth or an explanation, right? And I want to say this with so much compassion before we begin. Compassion for you, compassion for me. Okay? There's nothing wrong with you or me for doing this. Okay? The narrator in your head, the narrator in my head is intelligent, okay? It protects you, it helps you belong, it helps you survive, it helps you anticipate kind of rejection before it arrives, it helps you stay connected to the people around you. But somewhere along the way, many of us have stopped experiencing ourselves, right? And we started managing ourselves instead. Okay. And this episode is really just kind of an invitation back to the self underneath the performance, back to the self underneath the management of it all, back to the part of you that exists before the commentary begins, back to the version of you that does not need an audience in order to exist. Okay. So I want you to take a breath and maybe unclench your shoulders and maybe just bring a smile to your face. And let's go there together. So I was trying to figure out how I wanted to bring this forward to you because it happens in my life all the time, right? Um, Something will happen to me and I'll immediately think, oh my gosh, that's that's a word of the day. Or oh my gosh, that's and I do it when I'm talking with my clients. I'm like, oh my gosh, and I did it just yesterday. I was talking to my clients and we were talking about what it looks like to become vulnerable. And I thought, wow. And she was looking to have a conversation with another colleague of hers, and she wishes too that he would like kind of just put down his armor a bit. And I just said, wow, that's courage, right? We liken courage to like suiting up for armor, but real bravery is in the unarmoring. And I wrote that down. That's what I mean. Just like all of the little things that I do in a given day, that you might do in a given day, that immediately, because you observed it, takes you out of the experience of it. Okay? So so I was thinking like where else does this happen outside of like just myself? But I recognize it in myself. Like have you ever noticed that the moment that you become aware of yourself dancing, like right? Like you're just dancing. I was dancing at my sister's wedding. I was dancing and the moment I noticed myself dancing, I stopped dancing naturally, right? Or the moment that you realize that people are watching you laugh, the laugh changes. The moment that you notice yourself crying, the crying changes too. I recognize this for Mother's Day. I go down to the tree to honor her, and I didn't even make it to the tree. I just started crying before the tree. And I was crying naturally until I recognized the fact that I was crying. And then I was like, okay, do I really want to do this crying now? Like in this way, messy? Do I want to wait till I go to the tree? Like, do you see what I'm saying? It something happens the moment we become aware of ourselves. For me, I tighten, I edit, I monitor, I second guess, like even the tears, right? I negotiate myself as to when it is that it makes sense for me to honor my mom on Mother's Day. Okay? We it becomes it becomes performative in a sense. And I think a lot of us have been living this way for a really long time and we don't even realize that we're doing it anymore. And now that I notice that I'm doing it, now I'm aware that I'm aware of the awareness, if that makes sense. Um, I also realized this that I do this a few months. Um, I was sitting in my car after what I would call a conversation, a more challenging conversation. You know those ones that kind of stay in your body and in your head and in your heart afterward, the kind where your chest kind of feels tight. You know, you can feel your heartbeat racing still like 20 minutes later. Um, I had just finished. I had just finished one of those. The conversation was far over, but the emotions were not. And I noticed something in that moment as I was sitting in my car, right? Some part of me was already narrating that entire experience, right? Possibly for a podcast, possibly for an Instagram reel, possibly for another person, right? And for myself, as if I had become the audience of my own life. And I remember sitting there with my hands literally on the steering wheel thinking, when did this happen? And of course, I'm like, this needs to be a podcast, right? When did this start? When did every moment become something to analyze, right? To package, to explain, to improve, to share, to have a conversation about, to turn it into a meeting, right? When did I just when did I stop just having the experience and start managing the experience of myself having the experience, right? And so maybe the more important question is, when was the last time that I fully relaxed into my own life, right? When was the last time that I fully relaxed into my own life without making the awareness need to mean anything, without having the awareness at all? And I think this is happening to more people than we realize. And I think a part of what makes it really difficult about this is that we've confused, I think, awareness with performance, and those are not the same thing. Awareness is beautiful. Reflection is beautiful. Consciousness is beautiful, right? And this entire podcast exists because reflection matters. But there's a difference between experiencing your life, okay, and monitoring yourself having the experience. Is this landing? Does this make sense? I'd love to hear from you, right? Like, there is a difference. I want you to think about this for yourself. There's a difference between experiencing your life, right? Just being in it, right? Being conscious in it, even aware of it, and monitoring yourself having the experience. Being in the experience is different than monitoring yourself in that same experience. Because when we monitor ourselves, right, in that experience, we become like hyper aware. It takes the beautiful mindfulness movement and shifts it into something that I don't think it was ever meant to be. Hyper self-conscious, hyper evaluative. We become managers of ourselves, managers of our tone, managers of our emotions, managers of our image, managers of our reaction, managers of our healing, right? Managers of how we are being perceived in every single room we walk in, and we call that self-awareness. And if we're not careful, we stop living our lives and we just start curating our lives, even privately. Right? Have you ever caught yourself rehearsing a conversation before it ever happens? Then rehearsing the rehearsal and then imagining how the other person will respond, right? You haven't even had the conversation yet, and already three versions of you are managing it, right? Have you ever typed out a text message, right, and rewritten it and softened it and rewritten it again, and then wondered for 20 minutes, right, how it was going to land and whether or not you should send it and when you should send it? Or have you ever posted something really vulnerable and then checked it, right? Checked everyone's response before checking in with yourself about how you actually felt sharing it, right? And kind of as I mentioned before about crying, have you ever been crying and then suddenly become aware, right, of what your face looks like while crying, right? That's the observer arriving. And I know some of you listening know exactly what I mean, right? Because the moment that you become aware of yourself, the experience changes, right? The experience changes. In the quantum world, that's the observer effect. Okay? And the observer is not bad. I want to say this very carefully. The narrator is not bad. None of this is inherently bad. Okay? Again, the narrator was adaptive. The narrator learned how to keep you safe. The narrator learned how to help you belong. The narrator learned again how to scan the rooms and articulate reactions and prevent rejections. Like the narrator kept you safe. And that part of you is not broken. That part of you is wildly intelligent. The problem, if there is a problem to like highlight in this conversation, is not that that voice exists. The problem is that for so many of us, it has become the loudest voice in the room, right? Before the mindfulness movement, right? There really wasn't a whole lot of education and training and tools around this idea of self-awareness. And now we've gone the whole other way, right? Because somewhere underneath all the observing, all the evaluating and the editing and the performing and the monitoring and the managing, there's still a self, you, quietly waiting to be experienced instead of managed. As I mentioned, that in physics and in the quantum world, that is the observer effect. Okay? At the subatomic level, particles, right, behave differently the moment that they are observed, right? The thing being watched changes because it is being watched. And I know this sounds absurd, but just stay with me because I think this is happening psychologically and emotionally for all of us all day long. The second someone says, act natural, right? Like when we get our photos taken in our brand shots, right? Our photographer will be like, okay, just act natural. Nothing feels natural. The second you realize that someone is watching you um, at the gym, when I'm in a yoga class, your body changes. The second you become aware of yourself during a conversation, you start managing yourself inside the conversation, right? You start hearing yourself while you're talking, evaluating yourself while you're talking, correcting yourself while you're talking. Even while I'm talking on this podcast, I'm doing that. And I think many of us have become so self monitoring, so self aware, so self evaluating that we no longer know what it actually feels like to simply just be inside our own lives. Not fixing ourselves, not improving ourselves, not tracking ourselves, not optimizing ourselves, not narrating ourselves, not narrating the narrating, right? In this conversation right now. Just being. And honestly, I think that might be why so many of us are just exhausted because self monitoring is exhausting. Constant self awareness is exhausting. Constant self evaluation is exhausting. Constant self management is exhausting. And some of us have not rested in years inside ourselves. I mean, we've been by ourselves, but we haven't actually been with ourselves. Narrated, yes. Managed, yes. Improved, yes. Measured, yes. Performed, yes. And I know you have because you listen to podcasts like this in order to do that. And again, I have to say this again, that this is not bad, right? This is just a conversation to kind of really think about how much and have we, and I don't have the answers here. I I'm kind of leaning into you in this conversation for some. I don't have, I rarely have answers in these conversations, more just questions. Okay. Um, and so as I was thinking about the kind of the culmination of the conversation, if if managing and improving and measuring and performing and all of those things aren't inherently bad and they're not, um, and and if we've gone to the one extreme, then how do we get ourselves back to the middle? Like, is there a balance in this conversation? And so I was thinking about this idea of the unwitnessed self, and I think that's actually what I titled it. Okay, the unwitnessed self, right? The version of you that exists before the observation of you, before the commentary, the commentary of you. before the performance of you, before the management of you, right? Before the internal audience arrives? Is there a place in the middle between complete lack of self-awareness and massive awareness, super awareness, super consciousness? Is there a middle between unconsciousness, right? And super consciousness? And is that consciousness, right? And how is that different? Okay? Because the unwitnessed self, right? I'm just going to call the unwitnessed self is that middle ground, right? It's the middle between the hyper conscious, the hyper self-aware self and the like complete lack of self-awareness self. It's the unwitnessed self. Okay? The unwitnessed self is not profound. It's not um it's not optimized, it's not curated, it's not polished, it's not trying to become anything, right? The opposite of the show, the Becoming You show, right? It's just you. It's just you experiencing a moment without needing to turn it into something. It's the version of you that drinks coffee without analyzing the experience of drinking coffee. It's the version of you that laughs before becoming aware of the laugh. It's the version of you that hears music and starts dancing, right? Before you're like, ooh, I could, I could, I could listen to this song and do a word of the day on this song, right? Before self-consciousness, maybe it's that hyper or super vigilant self-consciousness arrives. The version of you that, I don't know, watches a sunset without immediately reaching for the language about it, right? The story about it, the song that you want to um, bring to it. Again, not that that's wrong. Um, I know for me, it was like, what's the version of me that cries without trying to make the crying meaningful? What's the version of me that exists before self-measurement begins? And I think many of us have not spent meaningful time with that self in a very long time, right? Not because we're fake, not because we're shallow, right? Because we've adapted to a world that taught us to constantly observe ourselves. And over time, the observing became so automatic that we become both the performer and the audience. And eventually we forgot that there was a difference. And here's why all of it just matters so much. Every relationship with you that you have with yourself underneath the performance becomes the foundation of every other relationship in your life, right? You cannot deeply rest with another person if you cannot deeply rest with yourself. You cannot truly feel seen by another human being if you're constantly editing yourself in your own presence. And this is important, right? Because self-belief, right, which is what we talked about in episode 1, is not built through constant self-evaluation. Self-belief is built through a relationship that you have with yourself. That ability to trust yourself, right? And the more we monitor ourselves, right, the harder it becomes to trust ourselves because we are constantly evaluating instead of experiencing, constantly measuring instead of relating, constantly correcting, right? Instead of just allowing. And eventually, our whole inner world begins to feel like a performance review. And I do think that this is why so many people feel disconnected from themselves, even though they've been doing more self-awareness work than ever. Again, not because they're disconnected, but because they're over monitoring the connection, right? And what's interesting is that this world rewards this. The world rewards self-management. The world rewards performance, hyper-awareness. We praise people for being polished and composed and managed and curated. But very few people are teaching us how to actually be with ourselves without improvement, without performance, without turning every moment into something useful. And I think somewhere along the way, many of us have just stopped having a relationship with ourselves in that way. And we started to project, right? We started having these projections on how we should be, and we've created a project of ourselves. And that's different, right? A relationship says, I'm here with you. A project says what needs to be fixed. And eventually, we spend our entire life as a project. And that becomes really lonely, right? Because projects are managed and people are loved. So what do we do with this, right? Honestly, not much. Okay. This isn't a fix yourself episode. This is not another framework. This is not another optimization strategy. This is just simply an invitation to allow some moments of your life to belong only to you. That has been my invitation since that moment in the car when I started evaluating the conversation and how I could make it into meaning. No audience, no explanation, no self-measurement, no conversation piece, no WOD, no reel, no music that I can capture to make this moment, this experience more profound. Can the experience just be profound in its own right? Can the unwitnessed self, in the unprofoundness of it, be wickedly profound? No audience, no explanation, just presence, just life, just you. And the practice is smaller than you think, right? It's standing in the kitchen, right? Standing at the counter for 30 seconds without reaching for your phone. It's driving home without narrating the entire day to yourself. It's sitting outside for 1 minute without trying to extract meaning from that moment. It's allowing joy without immediately analyzing the joy. It's allowing sadness without immediately turning it into a growth opportunity, right? It's letting a moment exist before collapsing it into a level of commentary or a conversation piece, right? And you'll almost notice, like I did, right? Immediately when you do that, that narrator comes back. It's quick, it's fast, right? It at least it was me like, oh, look at me being present, or look at me relaxing, or look at me not narrating, right? It's okay. It's like meditation, right? The practice of meditation isn't not to let your thoughts wander. The practice is letting your thoughts wander and bringing it back to the breath. It's kind of that same idea. Allowing yourself to be super hyper aware and then come back to the very profound version of the unwitnessed self. Okay? That's the practice. That's the practice. Coming back to this version of you where you're not both the observer and the audience. Okay? The goal is not to kill the narrator. The goal is to simply to remember that there is more of you in the room than the narrator alone. And I think over time, if you practice this gently, you'll begin to feel something return, not as a not as a concept, not as an insight, not as a breakthrough, but for me, it was something very familiar, right? Your own presence begins to feel familiar again. Your own company begins to feel a little softer again. There's not this competitive challenge of your existence. You stop feeling like someone that you're constantly managing, and you start beginning to feel like someone you are actually living alongside of and within. And honestly, I think as I wrap this up that I think that that might be one of the deepest forms of healing there is. So you don't need to stop sharing your life. You don't need to disappear from the world. You don't need to become less conscious. You don't need to become less aware, right? It's about becoming less performative inside your own experience. It's about allowing some moments to belong only to you. And so maybe courage this month is not becoming someone new. Maybe courage is relaxing enough to finally meet you, right? That person who was already there underneath all of it. So I welcome your questions. I welcome your feedback on this conversation. I welcome any answers to the questions that I posed or any insights that might have come up for you as we kind of navigated through our time together. Always welcome you into the membership. It's available for you. We'd love to see you inside the lab if you're not in there already. And I look forward to the next episode of this Courage series next week. I hope you'll join us in that conversation. Take care, everybody. Bye. If this episode cracked something open, good. let it. And then head to leahrollingcoaching.com and grab the tools to rewire the story and reclaim your future. It is yours. And then share this with someone who's still waiting to be chosen, still waiting for permission, and remind them they don't need a breakthrough, that they are the breakthrough. Until next time, my beautiful friends, invest in you and keep becoming.